What is going on, everybody? Here we are again on the XWFM 99.9 Lounge. I am Chronic Chris Page, coming in live and in living color, off of what I feel is a successful show with one Theo Pryce a couple weeks ago. The Heels and Face podcast seemed to have garnered some interest, so we're going to try and follow it up here. New program that we're gonna roll out, and this is gonna be the official first episode. And reality is I couldn't do this show without this man. It's the one and only Mr. Theo Pryce, brother. What's going on, dude?
What's crack-a-lackin'?
Man, I was very shocked to see the outpouring of support off of that first show that we put out.
Yeah, I mean, did we get more views than Vinny Lane's Fireside yet? Are we closing in on that?
I think we eclipsed that on day one.
Oof, poor Vinny.
Yeah, I know, man. Guy can't catch a break. What I think is very interesting on this as well is I think it topped you. As far as the views are concerned, brother, like it's there. Yeah, it's over you at this point. So it's arguably one of the most successful shows that we did under the Fireside label, which you and I talked off air. This just has completely new concept written all over it, and just it's a whole new kind of program. This is the Page and Pryce show, episode 1. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And today's topic, coming off of Heels and Faces, we're going to talk about long-term storyline and long-term storyline telling, and how to craft, what can be something, that can extend and do wonders character development wise. Theo, man, what are you thinking about today's topic?
I mean, it was one of the many topics that one of our guests on today's show proposed. And honestly, all the topics he threw out there on Twitter are fantastic. And I wrote all of them down, and I circled a couple that I really want to make sure we get to early on, so that we definitely cover them in case things happen and we can't continue on with the show. I want to make sure we get to them soon. But yeah, I'm excited for this one. I mean, I think those who know you and I know that long-term storytelling and storytelling in general is important to us. It's something that I think drives most of what we do, whether it's as role players or as GMs. One of my biggest kind of motivating factors is helping roster members tell the kinds of stories they want to, whether it's through the match writing, through segments, through their role plays, whatever it is. That's really important to me, and I think that's really what's exciting. So I'm excited to hear what our guests have to say and just kind of how this conversation goes. Like you said, this is a new show for us, a new concept. There is no script. We're just going to kind of take it as it goes, and hopefully it's as exciting and as well received as our first
Wait a minute, are you telling
quasi first episode.
are you telling me that we're supposed to have researchers? Are they supposed to be doing work? Do we need to do we need to hit up Vinny to spread a little more cash into the XWFM 99.9 production costs so we can make that happen?
I mean, if this show is as well received as that Heels and Face episode, then I would say we probably need to get a staff on board, some interns maybe, see what we can do to really bump up the production value.
I'm gonna need for you to use your stroke on that one, bud, because that's all coming from you. I think this is going to be a good little concept. I think it's going to be a fun little series, and I'm looking forward to kicking it off now. And as you alluded to earlier, one of the many topics that came in when we put out initial feelers came from one of our guests and good friend of mine, and I've been able to say that I've worked in this game with him for many years. Just recently, kind of sticking his head out from the shadows is none other than John Cable. Brother, what's going on, dude?
Oh, not too much, man. Not too much. And, I've never been an intern before. I might be interested in that.
Hey, I mean, free work's free work, right?
I've done lots of jobs, but I've never been an intern. That sounds interesting.
Well, I can tell you, you do not have to get on your knees for this one.
Oh, then I'm out.
Oh. You can. You don't have to.
No, never mind. I'm out.
It's not. It's encouraged, but it's not mandatory.
Look, if it's not forced, I don't know if I can handle it.
Well, this is listen. You've been on a couple of podcasts with us before. We did your blast from the past episode that tanked horribly. Uh,
Yeah, it was very underwhelming.
yeah, no doubt. Um, but
It's nice to be at the big boys table for a change.
yeah, well, you provided a lot of interesting topics and some stuff that we're definitely going to cover, and something that when Theo and I were chatting off air, we're just kind of like, hey, what's the next step? And I called you, and you and I were talking on the phone, and you're like, hey, did you happen to see the 16,000 show topics that I left for you? And at that point, I had not, and you started rambling them off one after another, and finally,
That was a 5-minute conversation, I think.
I
Like just
settled
me
on
telling you all the stuff I posted.
settled on pick one. If you could do one, what would it be? And this is
Yeah, it was definitely this one. This one was at the top of my priority list of all of the ideas we had because I think for me especially having a single character that's been in as long as it's been, John has evolved into a different thing than when he started. And after this number of years of writing for a character, it's always kind of hard for guys to find a new niche and keep the work going. And they want to move to a new character or whatever. And sometimes the best thing you can do is stick with what you know because the realism of that character is probably your best bet. And long term, building your story out from where you start to where you finish is a years long endeavor. All of us are in the same boat on that. So why not build character angles together and build those long-term stories that we all love to see? I mean, if you look back at wrestling history, the long-term angles are the ones that really stick out.
for sure, for sure. And definitely that's why we're going to do this show. We're going to dive into different aspects of this because you're 100% correct. We also have another guest on the line here. He's kind of sprung back onto the scene, probably over the last 4 or 5 months. Handler of Justin York. You've done several shows with me as well. How's it going, brother?
Going great, man. How you doing?
Oh, living that Florida dream. Just doing
Must
doing what I can
be
where I
nice.
can. But yeah, give me your initial take on long term storytelling.
So to add what John said, yeah. First off, you need the interest factor, right? If you're just jumping all over the place with no real plot or no guidelines to follow, it's going to become stale quick. Your character and looking over your work. Um, I believe your character has to have some direction, as you would in real life. You have to add realism to your character, and with no real story for them to follow, it's going to be an unsuccessful journey, in my opinion. And I think this episode will be successful for that reason, adding a little bit of guidance to how to tell a story and how to make it interesting. Spruce things up a little bit.
Well, I think Theo. Let me ask you this because at least from my perspective, and you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm 100% right because you had to grade a lot of my work when I was competitive in the XWF, and I want to say through like 19 through 20, one of the things that I believe that I was lacking was the long-term story arc of the character Chris Page.
Yeah, I mean, so when you first came back, I thought you did a pretty solid job of kind of giving some backstory as to who and what Chris was for those of us, who may have only known him by name but not really known a lot about him. I think at first, while you were, getting your footing into the landscape of what the XWF is today, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of long term vision, at least in the work. There may have been in terms of like the angle and what you wanted to do with your character, and I think that's something a conversation we can get into later. But in terms of your work itself, you know, each piece for the most part was kind of standalone. There may be references and callbacks to previous ones, but for the most part, each one was its own little standalone story. I think when you really started working with and like the whole Apex thing, I think that's when your focus shifted into a long-term story between the two characters, and I mean that that encompassed 2-3 years maybe. I don't remember exactly how long,
Well,
but it was it was a while, and it was fantastic.
Well, what happens here is, and I'm going to leave this in just because I totally screwed the pooch, and I want people to know that I'm not perfect and I make mistakes. I took this to role playing instead of storytelling on television. So we'll kick it over to actually the storytelling aspect on what you see on TV and what crafting a good storyline. And I think, John, I'll shoot over to you next with this. I always say you're only as good as your dance partner. And obviously, what I mean by that is you're going to get the better story, you're going to get the better angle, and you're going to get the better overall product for your readers within your federation with collaborating, and that comes with having someone who's equally as invested.
Well, and not just equally invested, but it brings new eyeballs to a character that maybe has not been seen by the same people. Like, people follow individual characters around wherever they are because they like to read their work. Well, those fans of those characters are going to see your work when you collaborate. It's just like what we do here on YouTube or what we do on any other platform. Collaborating with other creators is how new audiences find new attractions.
Theo, what are your thoughts on that one, bud?
I mean, I think that's completely accurate, and I think it kind of mirrors something I said a couple weeks ago, or maybe when we were doing like the heels and face thing. We were talking about like getting other guests on and Fed heads and stuff, because I am big on collaboration in any setting. I'm big on collaboration because I think, like John said, it brings other eyes to your work that maybe didn't see it normally. But it even if that didn't happen, there's the sharing of ideas and different things that can get thrown around that maybe would never have happened if you were working by yourself. That other perspective. I think collaborating with people. I mean, those who know me know I love being in stables. I love doing tag teams, and it's because I love that collaboration. And I find that's the easiest way to craft long-term stories. You can do it on your own. I've seen people do it, but I always think it's better, with a dance partner, so to speak, or several. If you're fortunate enough to do it.
I've always been considering myself more of a tag team wrestler than a singles champ. Not that I haven't gained my own belts or run my own singles programs, but I've always just enjoyed tagging with someone more because the aspect of working with someone else, like when I work with Chris or when I work with anybody else, I'm enjoying building on the story. Like, Bam and I are working on our first show coming into WGWF Reunion or the relaunch, and we're already working on ideas for the match. It's not for a month.
Pre-planning, that's always a wise step and a good first step to take in any direction when it comes to telling a long-term story. Justin, let me come over to you real quick. What are your thoughts on the whole aspect of trying to kick off, let's use that word, to kick off a longer term story? What would you what would your steps be?
So number one with kicking off a long-term story, as you said, it's always better to have a partner, to collaborate with, whether it be in a feud, whether it be in a tag team or stable. It's always good to have other people to work off of. It helps enhance your product, helps enhance your work, and then you can also build from there, right? If you take a feud, for instance, you get two guys that want to go at it for whatever reason. And you can take anything to build from there. One of my favorite steps to take, is in long term building is more or less. I like the attack angle. Um, you know, you build up a little bit. Have some shit talk. Maybe a run in here or there, and then you do a big attack. Have one of the other guys hurt per se, or take them off of the show. And then it builds suspense for a show or two, and you can cap that off with the hurt superstar per se returning, and you get your big pop, and it's something you would see on television, right? And that's just one example of storytelling. It's a very summarized version, but it's all about the build, uh, the start, the finish, and how you build in between, the meat and potatoes. And I think there's several ways you can do it and be successful.
One of the key components that I want to talk about, Theo, I'm gonna come over to you first with this one because I think you're just gonna you're gonna nail it. Um, you have to be willing to adapt. So what I mean by that, um, and telling a long-term story. I'll have to use the Robert Main story as an example in the XWF because it was 2 years. It did go 2 years, and I thought it was a really well put together story. Uh, However, we knew going into the story that we didn't have a definitive ending, right? We had to be able to adapt and pivot if we had to pivot, because at the end of the day, I think everybody wants their story to stand out and to be the attraction for the Fed, whether they're the champion or whether they're not the champion. And there's ways to do that where you can legitimately steal the show with a single story if you're building it right. And you can't, in my opinion, you can't say, all right, here's what we're doing week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, because you're gonna know if you don't have the writer's attention or the your Fed's attention with your story, because nobody's gonna be talking about it. So if you don't, I think you have to in chapter 1 you have to lay down the groundwork to gauge the reaction. Theo, what are you thinking?
Thinking a lot of things. I think when it comes to long term storytelling, you have to have an outline of what you want to do, but to try and put specific time frames on things, I think it's difficult because all kinds of things happen. I think it's a lot easier to tell a story in real professional wrestling because there are a lot more things that the storytellers can control, be it wins and losses, who has titles. Like, you can put a title on somebody in the WWF and that person's going to have the title for 3, 6 months, a year, whatever, barring injury. You don't know that with defense. You can hope, but you don't know. So I think planning stories around titles is a tricky thing. I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying I would not make it the focus of what your story is, because if you do and something happens, you've got to quickly try and figure things out and make things kind of work. And typically, those of us reading along can kind of see where maybe this went a little bit of awry because something happened that we weren't considering. So I think having a story or having an outline of where you want things to go and how you want them to progress, but give yourself wiggle room, give yourself some leeway to see how things, you know, play out. And I think it's important to have a dance partner who understands, what the end game is and understands what might need to happen throughout the storyline to make it successful. Um, just if you're gonna have a one-on-one feud with somebody, it doesn't really work well if one guy is winning all the matches, right? Like it just looks crappy. It probably doesn't feel great. It's like you're probably gonna have to job a match or two, and that's something that you should talk about with the person you're doing the feud with to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that what you're doing tells the best story possible for you, for them. The goal is to get everyone over at some point within the story. Um, so you gotta it really does. It's collaborative. It's collaborative the entire way. And I think people need to understand that there is a give and take there. You can't. Some people, I think, don't tell these long term stories or don't get into these feuds because they struggle with the notion of their character not just losing, but maybe not looking strong all the time. And that isn't life. And I think people need to understand that maybe sometimes you got to take one on the chin to further the story along.
Well, case in point, and I'll go again, and by all means, Justin and John, when we get back around to you, if you have a reference point on this too, feel free to share it. I want to use the little story with Thad and Paige as an example here. You remember when Thad came back in 2020, he got the TV title off of TK and had no interest in the TV title because he wanted to do the Unlimited on Warfare, right? What happened? Well, we already had this little side story worked out where Paige was supposed to be challenging. Um, I think I had possession of the belt. So what happened? Thad hit me up and said, "Hey, here's what I want to do. Are you interested in doing this?" I said, "Absolutely." Well, what happened after that? Obviously, we hooked up in a ladder match, and Paige went over. Well, the next big show was Relentless, so we did a rematch where Thad got a win back, like via DQ, and it just organically grew from there. But that's the essence of give and take. Like, obviously, we did a protected finish for the ladder match, and we did a protected finish on the DQ because ultimately we knew at that point we had to deliver something that was not, a storyline or a script. Um, you see what I'm saying with that, Theo?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important thing to note is that, like, you know, again, the goal is not to just get one person over, it's to get both people over. And you do it incrementally. Um, so you work out those endings. And I don't know, how feds feel about angled finishes for non-angled feds, and I'm certainly not telling a fed what to do. In XWF, we don't encourage it, but we allow it. If all parties are on board and we see the merit in it, absolutely. If you want to work something out with somebody to further a storyline, by all means do it. And and when people are doing it the right way, yeah, you could job to somebody, but you're still writing an ending that protects them, that works for them. And I think you can tell as a good a story, if not a better story, from a loss than you can from a win. So I think it's all about making sure that everyone looks good at the end of the day. And maybe that doesn't always happen on every show, but at the end, I think the goal is to walk away from this story, everyone happy about their work, everyone happy about their character portrayal, and people, seeing the way you did it and thinking, hey, maybe I could do that someday.
For sure, for sure. John, you've listened to us kind of ramble on here for just a second. Give me some of your thoughts, buddy.
Well, I mean, I can particularly remember a particular booking that Paige put me in against the Sentinel and how that went for him. Because
Ah,
I laid straight down and took a 3 count in the middle of a title run. Because I didn't want to fight the Sentinel. Was not interested.
that's true. That's true.
And it all just built on the story that we were running at the time. And I never really understood the perception of a person not wanting to take a loss. Because I understand if you are in a competitive match and it's not scripted and you feel like the judging was incorrect. I'm sure that we have all been in this position and it sucks and we deal with it. We move to another place, we get over it, whatever it is that we do, we manage to get by. But when we're building an angle, especially with another person, if at any point in time the other person doesn't get some kind of benefit out of it, then what are we doing really? Then we're just running over someone else's story, and that's not collaborative or building anything, and no one will be interested in seeing it.
Theo, what do you think about that?
I think he's absolutely right. If both people aren't on board and aren't willing to give and take, then why are we doing this? What is the point? Because you can just steamroll people if you want to. Just ask for bookings against lesser opponents, for lack of a better term. But if the goal is to have a long-term story, then there has to be that give and take.
I will almost never even take a match against somebody that I don't think is on par with where I'm at. And that's not to toot my own horn or think I'm greater than I am, but there are some people that just aren't ready to go at me. And it's like the Sentinel match. He's an NPC. We were playing him on the side. There's no reason that I should put a lot of effort and spend a week writing a piece for that. I want to challenge people. You go after the best of the best. This is what we want out of this entire thing. And that's why we challenge ourselves the way that we do.
Justin, let me come over to you, man. What are your thoughts on everything that you've heard so far?
Yes, sir. One thing that sticks out to me is when you're in the competitive format, like you said, some people don't want to take the loss or whatever the case is. So one way I've found to benefit a story and kind of a workaround for that I like to do even still is find ways to put them over in the match. Like have a huge spot or something that makes the other character look really well. And I think that's something that you and I did, Paige, before we aligned in character. Was we put on a match and particularly had a few high spots to push forth the story we had coming, being, you and I aligning and our characters getting to know each other. So that's one way I like to get around the whole competitive format, as you said, when people don't want to take the loss. There are ways you can benefit the story, and I think that's a massive one, is put each other over in the match.
Well, it's a situation like obviously when you're crafting that long term story, I can only speak on experience. You talked about having an outline, but you need to be adaptable to that outline because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think Theo, going back to something you said, I 100% agree that while everyone would love to wrap a major story around a championship, belts change hands and e-feds like farts dissipates in the wind, brother. It's if not every week, it's every other week or every other month, something happening. I think when you're crafting that story and you're crafting, I think the arcs are critical. I go back to the Robert Main deal when I came back in 2019. It was supposed to be a War Games match and then a uni match, but was having a little bit of fun, and it turned into two uni matches, and then it turned into a tag run that went for a year. Like none of this was like planned, but all this was straight up within the storytelling of Robert Mann and Chris Page, and it just built and it built and it built. I think your arcs are crucial and they're critical. So when I guess my question that I'm going to pose to everybody is when you're crafting that long term story, how do you know, or for those out there who are trying to craft a story, how do you know when that arc is perfect? At what point in time within your story? From let's talk about your beginning of your story to your first story arc. Theo, how critical is it to get those jiving just right, and how do you know is the right spot?
I think that's kind of a loaded question. Um,
Yes.
Conversation, communication. I think it's working it out. I mean, I feel like if you're in a long term story with somebody, or you're planning to be right, and you've had these conversations with people, I think you just know, like you've had conversations and you pick your right spots. I don't think you necessarily. I would think most people don't necessarily jump into it and say, "Hey, just attack me," and then we'll go from there. Like I think you are a little bit more detailed about it. Uh, but I could be wrong. I mean, I haven't role played for a while, so for me, a lot of it is kind of coordinating stories with people and helping to get things done. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's all about the conversation and the communication, and making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay, well, what are you thinking?
So when you mentioned that, I knew when we did the Darien Dream Terry Borden run,
Dream of Maniacs, baby.
dude, when that started, I was not sure if it was gonna do well because I wasn't used to writing for Darien yet. And there was a whole bunch of stuff going on with that. Like that was a plot twist inside a plot twist inside a plot twist. So we had to play that one real careful on what I said and did under the mask before the reveal, because that was both an in character and out of character disguise. And that was pretty touchy at the time.
No.
It was absolutely me be involved in touchy out of character. No way.
No.
Can't imagine.
Right.
But when we actually made the run for the tag titles, like we had done a few matches, we had stuff going on in singles and in tags together. When we started in that rhythm towards the tag titles, I knew that our run was going well. Like in that part of the story with everybody that was involved and all the planning that we put into it, we were months ahead of ourselves in the plotting phase. And we rolled with a lot of stuff, and the tag titles changed hands a few times. We got through a tournament with them. Like, it was kind of nuts. And we had to adapt the story every week, but we had it planned out months in advance. And I think when we went into the title run, by then I felt like the run was good for us. And that was when I knew the story was catching. The whole company was kind of talking about the American Maniacs, and like we were on fire at the time.
Aw, the memories. The memories. Mr. York.
Yes, sir. So, just to add to what everybody else said, I feel like one key in long-term storytelling for me is chemistry with the other handler, both in character and out of character. And a reference point for me on that would be a storyline I currently have going with another handler, guy that handles JD Driftwood. I was very uncertain uh, about the start of the feud. It was like a death match kind of thing, and that's not my gig. But it was received very well. The characters jived well on screen per se, and we've done some talking out of character about where we want to go and how we're going to get there from here. And the chemistry between me and him as a handler and in character is very high. And to me, that's one key in storytelling: investment and chemistry.
You know who else is high? This guy. Uh,
Me too. That's
I,
probably why I'm coming off.
yeah, I know
Fuck.
that's
Everyone in the room.
shocking news. Chris Page is stoned doing a podcast. Um, I think with storytelling again, we've talked about it. Chemistry is obviously the big thing. Also, being able to adapt is a big thing. Um, I don't know about you guys, but I enjoy the good roller coaster ride that a really good story can take you on. And it's like, from my perspective, anytime that I'm doing an angle or I'm doing a story, like I'm again trying to anticipate what can I do to catch the reader's attention to make them say, "Oh, wait a minute, I know that this is going on over here, but this right here has just got me." Um, how important is shock value when you're going through your stories, in your opinion, guys? John, let me come to you first.
Um, it depends on the thing. I don't think that shock is always the thing I go for. I think in the career that I've had as John, I don't I don't really go for shock value ever. I think a lot of the things that I've said and done are very like, okay, yeah, I can see John would do that because that's kind of how John is. He's really no nonsense. He's cut and dry and he does what he says. And I think um in building I think more importantly, I think rather than shock is like, what's my goal as my character, like as John? What is John going for? And if shock is the thing that he needs, then sure, I'm at Home Depot getting a box full of razor blades and a big crystal bowl. I'm in there.
that's an
But
that's an inside joke.
but I mean, if shock doesn't suit the story, then shock isn't really that important. I think that telling a good story is what the audience is going to recognize, and doing things that your character would do. Going back to that realism part, like if my character is a heel, and like take MDK for example, when MDK is in a role play, I don't doubt that he would kick a kid on the side of the road and grab his mom's tit. Like, I don't doubt that from his character at all. Is it shocking? Absolutely, but it fits his character. So it all depends on what you're going for. But shock is a tool for sure. But it really goes to like, what's the goal? What's the end goal for the storyline? And how can you get your character's motives across? And if shock is the way you go, certain characters do that really well. Grimoire Smiles, MDK, we've seen a lot of them just do well with shock value.
Justin, what are your thoughts on that one?
So I'm along the same lines. I don't know if shock is the right word I would use. I would use more unpredictability from my character's perspective. With the long-term storytelling, you never know what he's going to do or what he's going to say or where he's going to go. And I think that's part of the shock, especially being involved in a story with my character. Um, the unpredictability of it, makes it fun in the long term. and there's many options that you can go from there with a character like that. So if I was to describe the main goal that I like to achieve in long-term storytelling, it'd be unpredictability, both from myself and from the other handler, and that also adds on to being able to adapt. You got to be able to adapt to any situation week from week. You never know what's going to happen, especially in a competitive format. And I think that would be the key for me.
Theo, what are your thoughts on what you've been hearing?
It's funny because it kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with one of the current members of the XWF, and kind of some of the long-term story we've been planning around their character. And one of the things that we talked about was, do we need to change up the story because it seems like maybe it's predictable? Do we need to throw a swerve in there to surprise people or to shock people? And you know, I think surprises are always fun. Shocks are great, but I think there's a time and place for it, like everything else. And I don't think that one should do it just to be gratuitous. I think you have to try and read the room, or in this case, read the boards, and kind of pay attention to what the people are saying about your storyline, be it on your boards or on Discord, on Twitter, etc., whatever medium you might use to talk about your Fed stuff. See what they're saying. Are they enthralled with the story? Are they captivated by it, or are they bored by it? If they're bored by it or not really into it, then yeah, throw something in there to try and pull their attention back in. If they're loving it, then why screw up a good thing? Roll with what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think something that at least it should be pointed out. For every one good story, I think one person does. I think there's probably about 15 that sucked. I think we can be fair by saying that, because not everything that you put together is going to be successful, and I think that that's something else that is kind of key. Like you can't be afraid to fail, because if not, you're never going to succeed. It's like one of those situations. Do you see what I'm saying, Theo?
I do, and I agree completely. I think you have to take that shot, and hopefully it works out for you. But if it doesn't, that's all right. It's not the end of the world. You adapt, you figure something else out, and you try something else.
Well, let me ask you this, John. I'm gonna go to you first on this one. Let's say that I've planned out a long-term story, but obviously it's not going over well. I can tell that the interest is not there, and I've tried to peak it, and I've tried to throw a shock value in. Um, is it okay to just pull the plug and say, let's just take this home early?
Absolutely.
Yep.
What I
Yep.
mean, if a plan you have going is not working, then you pull the plug on the program and you figure out a different direction to run with all the characters.
For sure. For sure. I was just
Yeah,
making
that's a no question. Like if whatever you're doing isn't working, you either change it or abandon it.
Well, let me ask you on the flip side of that. Let's say that you guys are ready to end this thing, but it's still red hot, and you feel like you could get a little bit more out of it. How do you extend it?
Um, it that's a
Or
touchy
do
one.
you? Or do you? Or do
I
you? Or do
I
you
don't
just
think you
say
do.
you just say, voila, we'll leave you
I
wanting
don't
more.
think I don't think you do. In that case, when you've got a red hot angle and you're running up to the end, I think you run that ramp all the way to the exit and just jump off. And then in a month, do an encore. Like keep a little hitter like back and forth on the background. But then in a month or two, do another resurgence. That'll only pick up the heat. And that's how you extend your angle later by ending what you're doing and then figuring out a new way to get re involved later.
Mr. Pryce.
I think to try and put it to an analogy of like a television show, I think there's nothing worse when a TV show kind of jumps the shark and goes from being great to it just has a shitty ending that's all people remember. Like I don't know how many people have watched the show like Dexter. Prior to them having a new season this past year, everybody who loved Dexter, all they ever talked about was the shitty ass ending that Dexter had, and it was
Preach.
fucking awful.
Preach.
Um, so yeah, I mean, if something is great and you're coming to the ending point, don't extend it as much as you might feel like that's the right thing to do because you've got people that are into it and it's going great, don't. Because I promise you, there is going to come a time where it jumps the shark, and it's probably going to be before you realize it. And then all that work that you've done, it's not ruined because it'll always be there, but it's not what people are going to remember most likely. And that sucks to put in all that time and effort. And what people remember is how it fizzled at the end. Like, nobody wants that.
Oh, Justin.
I'm with Theo on this one. Um, if you're riding red hot and you feel like it's time to come to the end, it's best just to end it. If you're riding red hot and you've come to the end, first of all, you're successful. You've told a long-term story, and people are still very invested. And if you both, as handlers, feel that's the end, what better way to go out? That's all anyone's ever going to talk about. They're going to remember the red hot ending that they wanted to continue, but it was time to tell the end of the story. And like I said, what better way to go out, right? People are going to talk about you both at the top of your career, your storyline. You were at the height of whatever it was you were doing at the time, and you went out that way, as opposed to riding it till the wheels cracked, and then basically having the shits at the end and nowhere to go.
Preach.
The drizzling shit suck. Uh, I've had a couple of those. I've had a couple of those storylines. No, that's there it goes. Well, listen, John, what else do you think is a crucial element in trying to tell this long term story?
I think the most important element in trying to tell the long-term story is for each of the characters to identify what their goals are and then actively work towards them. Don't just tell a story to tell a story. Figure out what your goals are and then figure out what your literal plan to get there is.
I agree 100% on that. But something else that I was going to say is what's next for both characters involved. Once you get to this towards you, once you know that you're winding this story down, what do you have next? Not saying pre-planning, but obviously, each character coming out of it's got to have a direction to go. I think one of the things that kills the long-term storytelling is if there's a lag in between both characters, especially if it's red hot. Call me crazy, and that may give me heat, but I'm just saying if you don't have something to fall back on and you don't have something to immediately go into, it doesn't have to be a championship. It could be another short-term storyline for a month or so, but to have something to fall forward into. Theo, you're a booker. What do you think about that?
It depends on the person, to be honest with you. I mean, some people might want a little bit of a break. I mean, if they've really invested a lot of time and effort into something, they might welcome that ending so they can kind of recharge their batteries. Um, but I think you are atypical compared to a lot of e-fetters in that sitting down and not doing something doesn't work for you. Like, you have to be busy. You have to be doing things. Whether it's writing role plays for 5 different feds, we're doing 435 different podcasts. Like, you have to be
436, asshole. Get it right.
whatever. My bad. I forgot about the new one. But like, I think some people like that break, but I think I think for those who don't, yeah, they're going to want to go from one thing right into the next. And having that lined up, I think a good storyteller, like a job, you don't leave a job until you have a new job, um, typically. And I think that's probably the case for people that are long term storytellers. They know what their next thing is, and they have their next jumping off point already figured out. But some people, they prefer to just sit tight for a little bit and kind of see where things go, and maybe something happens organically.
Something that we didn't mention, and I was just sitting here thinking about it. Jesus Christ, the stone guy has to think about everything. One of the most important pieces of long-term storytelling, outside of everything that we've already discussed, selling the fucking story. John Cable.
Brother, I think if you are telling a story that furthers the goals of your characters and drives a good narrative, you don't have to sell anything. I think it sells itself. I think that's the whole point to having realistic in character goals for the story. Because if you're telling the story from your perspective, and the guy you're working with is telling the story from his perspective, and you're collaborating on the work, and you guys are both working towards a realistic goal for your characters, and you're building that momentum, you don't have to sell anything
Well,
because everybody's going to be invested.
let me be a little bit more specific. I leave you a bloody, broken mess. Selling the bloody, broken mess. Selling
Well, I mean,
the details of the story. And while
so
it may sound like it's trivial and shouldn't be discussed, there are people out there that either don't sell a story or
they
they
Brock Lesnar the whole thing.
correct.
Right, yeah. So the Brock Lesnaring the issue, yeah. So there are a million and one ways to write in a loss, an injury, a catastrophe, whatever it is. There are there, man. It's a damn good question. There are so many ways to write in a good part of the angle that has you losing or has you getting your ass handed to you, that like you just write yourself out. So then instead of being on the show, say we had a New York death match and one guy just got annihilated off of a 20-foot thing into a table. Oh, wait, we did that. That's right. So then you take a few breaks off of the show, but you still put in segments. You still write with other people. There are ways to work into other storylines while you're on the shelf, so to speak, that keep you relevant and active in the storyline that you're telling. And sometimes the long term story that you're telling should involve these breaks just to keep the action out of the ring and build on the story.
Goddamn. I wasn't expecting all that one. You kind of blew my mind there for a second.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just stoned. Justin.
Yes, sir. So going back to the scenarios that you both mentioned, and making it relevant to telling the story, like being left a broken mess or thrown off of something. Personally, it's one of my favorite things to do as far as selling a story. It just recently happened to me, and one of the ways I like to write it in and sell it, both for myself and for the other character, is uh, certain scenes. Like you could do a hospital scene. Your character's all busted up, but they're also, still talking shit about their opponent. There's plenty of ways that you can work off of things like that, and I think personally, like Theo said earlier, there's more you can learn from a loss than a win. And so, in situations where you are left, fucked up in a bit of a mess, I feel like there's a lot more directions you can go with that than off of a win, and you can sell it way easier. And it's actually a lot of fun to do.
Well,
One of the prime examples of that is if your character has side characters around it, NPCs in their story, having them be at the hospital and showing emotions about their dangerous scenario or wanting them to leave the sport or whatever is a way to tie in an emotional connection to your character and build on the layers that your character is portraying and give them something to fight about.
It's funny you say that because that's exactly how I sold it.
But I mean, it's a win for you, even in a loss, even in a beating. It's an absolute win for the storytelling.
Absolutely, and you can further the story so much from that, and that's personally why I enjoy it. One of my favorite things to do is, as far as the storyline goes, is to lose because you can build so much from it, and your creativity is endless from that point on.
well said. Well said, Mr. Theo Pryce.
Yeah, I mean, some of my favorite writing, Chris, and you know this, having worked with Drew Argyle, was that character existed to get his ass kicked. Like he was the guy that took all the bumps in the big matches, and he was the one who walked out bloodied and broken and beaten. Because that to me was fun. The follow up to that was fun. To me, it's not fun. You go out there, you win a match, ho hum, I won again. Like, all right, whatever. Like you got your ass kicked. Selling that selling how you're feeling, how you're, what your character's going through, how they're going to get back, what their motivation is, what their agenda is, what their next step is. There's a lot more to that than just, all right, I won a match, now I got to go out and do it again and face somebody else. Like, that's boring as hell. Like, and maybe people love that. People that go out there and they win all the time, the James Ravens of the world, who never lose ever. Love you, James.
Hell,
But
Raven.
Out.
yeah,
Raven.
but like, to me, it's way more fun to have that character that's going out there and they're taking the beatings. That's some of my most favorite writing. And I also feel it's somewhat liberating too, because you can just go out there and have fun and do your thing. You don't have to worry about the wins and losses. You're just going out there to tell a good story however you can. And in this case, it involves getting your shit kicked in.
So,
And I can tell you from real experience that is a fun way to do it, but it hurts a lot.
hold on. So this is what I'm talking about for just a second. Like take the Cannabis Cup with Corey Black. Justin, you're talking about making sure everybody's got a spot. Everybody does this. Like I had Corey do that stage dive, and like he cracked Paige's ribs. Well, I'm still selling that to this day. So it's like Corey Black is responsible for my downward spiraling character, and he could take claim for that. And I feel like that is a powerful statement, even though he came up short in the match.
Yeah, that's a win in character. That's
for sure. I'm sorry.
No, I mean for Corey, that's a huge win in character. Like now he's at least got a bragging right. Anybody that's like, well, you lost to, yeah, I might have lost to him, but look what he's doing right now.
Who came out worse, right?
Right. Yeah, this might look bad, but you should have seen the other guy.
Theo, man, I think this has been a fucking good episode.
Yeah, I mean, I went into it with no expectations because we don't know, what it's going to be. We really just wanted to kind of have a discussion centered around a central topic and kind of see where it goes. And I thought it was great getting the perspective of two different people, one who I think has been doing this a while, and one who I believe, Justin, you're a little newer to it, or at least more recently coming back. So, the game has changed for sure. But, it was great to get those perspectives in there and kind of intermingle it a little bit with some of our experiences. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good show. Hopefully the listeners agree.
I hope so too. And one of the other points I wanted to make real quick is that we always look at this from like a hobby standpoint or from an e-fedding standpoint. What we do in this is not different than real feds. Working in a real fed and writing stories and being a worker is exactly like what we do. We trade the gym time for screen time, but all of the same considerations go into our characters and the narratives that we put in, or should anyway, just like they do in the real industry. So I want to give a shout out to all the handlers out there and all the fed heads and everybody that puts into this. Do not think that your effort is diminished because it's not the real show. This is just as important to us as it is to real workers. And from a real worker, the work we put in here on this as a hobby is not any different than what real guys do at the real big show. So just hands up to all of you guys out there doing this. We love each and every one of you, and we are all passionate about this. And we want you to be passionate about it too.
Are you through giving verbal fellatio?
I guess so.
Oh, I never thought that I would see the lovable side of John Cable.
Phone, sex, voice, and all.
I know.
I mean, it's there. It exists. I'm just saying.
I was almost playing with my nipples, dude. Like it was almost
Oh,
happening.
wow.
It was almost
Not
happening.
that it hasn't happened before. I mean, come on.
Jesus Christ.
Don't lie, Paige. Come on now.
Now we've went off the rails. Listen, John, I echo those sentiments. Justin, you got anything you want to say to the people before we go ahead and close this out?
Yeah, just one more thing to finish it off. I think one thing we touched minimally on was being able to sell your story through your role plays as well. Don't think that you just have to sell your story in the show or in angles or in matches. There's plenty of stuff you can do throughout your role plays, both collaboratively with who you're working with or by yourself to build the story and further your character development along. And yeah, that's it. That's the main point I wanted to make, really, is that, your storytelling doesn't just have to be in the show.
Well, I'm not going to speak for Theo, but I definitely appreciate both of you guys taking the time to come in and sit down with us and talk with us tonight.
It was great. I was glad that you guys were able to come on. Having not really spoken to either, well, certainly not literally spoken to either of you before. Not spoken to you, John, at all. It was great to get your perspective and hear what you had to say. And I was messaging Paige, as we were having this conversation. I'm really impressed with the things that John's saying. And Justin, having talked to you recently about your upcoming show, it was great to put a voice to the name. And I'm looking forward to working with both of you, going forward. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a blast, and I hope we can do it again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It has been a pleasure. I may be old, but I know stuff.
I mean, John gave us like 600 different topics, so I'm sure
I
we can
have
get you guys on again.
I have literally 3 trillion more of them.
He does.
And
I believe
I got a ton of shit to say.
it.
Same. So definitely, I will happily welcome any invite to do these in the future.
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we definitely appreciate it. Theo, let me talk to you for a minute.
Sure.
How you feeling, bud?
I'm feeling like that was a solid first show. Like I said on Twitter, I want to hear from people that listen to it. Did they like it? What do they want to hear differently? What do they want to hear that we didn't do? What did they like? What did they not like? What are some topics they want to talk about? Do they want to come on the show? I mean, I want to hear it all. If it totally sucked ass, tell me. I'm a big boy. I got thin skin or thick skin. I'll cry about it a little bit.
You
Maybe
said
have
it.
a little.
You said it right the first time. You thin-skinned bitch.
You're so full of shit. I'll have a drink. I'll cry about it a little bit. I'll get over it. But no, I mean, if we're gonna do this right, let's do it right,
That's the way I
and
feel.
let's give the people what they want. Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. So, again, the gauntlet is thrown down, ladies and gentlemen. We want to hear from you. You can, Theo, give them your fucking Twitter shit, because I don't know it off the top of my head.
It is Theo_Pryce.
There you go, Theo_Pryce. I am at Chronic CP. You know what? I'm stoned. I can just put that in the description, and it could have saved us a few seconds of airtime. But it's on Vinny, so I think it's okay.
There you go.
I don't know what we're gonna come back with. We'll talk about it off air. We'll get another topic together. We'll hopefully hear from some of you guys. If you got anything and you want to come on the show and talk about it, let's go. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. Theo, it's always a pleasure, my man.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
This is, as always, XWFM 99.9 production. I'm Chris Page. He is Theo Pryce. We are saying goodbye for now, but we'll chat again with you soon.
Lips as sweet as candy.